I believe that there's a inherent flaw in most style guides today, and that's to do with the amount of flexibility and the amount of scope that they give designers, marketers, creatives to interpret the brand, interpret the messaging. Hi, I'm Chris. I've been a designer and creative director for 25 years, and I have some thoughts. I think that the flexibility of brand style guides today ultimately contribute, I believe, to the creation of ineffective, or what I'd probably term brand adjacent marketing. And that's just marketing that's kind of like the core brand, but not. It's kind of there, but not. There's a level of overlap, but it's not quite on the mark. I believe that then results in a diminished, obviously, brand equity over time, and that sort of culminates, contributes, builds up to the fact that ultimately a rebrand or some sort of rebrand process is required to kind of clean up the mess that has developed over the course of time. I believe that the answer to this problem is to have your style guide locked down as tight as possible. For example, no secondary color palettes, no secondary typefaces, no secondary templates, no tertiary options, no flexible type systems, no leeway with photography styles. I believe that the tighter you lock it down in the initial design phase and the initial implementations, the further your brand will go in the long run. The wider it is, the more flexible it is, the shorter it will last. I believe that your brand, your style guide, and your brand need to be locked down for three main reasons. We are in an environment where we are being bombarded more than ever with marketing messages, brand messages, personal brand messages, government messages. It is such a contested environment. So our attention span for these messages is slimmer and slimmer. And Gary Vee coins the term the attention economy, and he believes that attention is the most valuable resource on the planet. If these things are true, we're being bombarded more than ever. Attention is the most valuable commodity. Why would I try and diversify or mix up my verbal, visual messaging just for the sake of being flexible or mixing it up? I need to be so on point with my messaging because I only have a super limited time to get my message across, to sell my product, to let people know of my service. I don't think you want to diversify that. I don't think you want to muddy the waters on that. So, for example, just a basic ad structure here. So let's take this style guide that we're using as an example, and the color palettes that it says we can use. Even if we just use the primaries, we've got the black, the red, and the kind of tinted red. I can create these three examples, these ad format examples, where there's text top left, logo bottom left, and some supporting text bottom right, say. From those three colors, I can do those three options. Now, let's say that I keep the same color palette, but I get some flexibility in the layout of the ad. Well, that gives me these three examples here, which could feasibly be another company, really, or another organization. Well, let's say that we don't change the layout, but we can do primary and secondary colors. Well, that gives us these examples. But even if, let's say, we have the ultimate flexibility and we're able to change layouts and we're able to change colors, and that's when we get ads like this. These looks like three very different companies. Now, unless your icon or your logo is really distinct, it's pretty much the only common element in that visual. I believe that you should be doing this. Same placement for the same elements in every ad, in every touch point. I believe that brands are built on consistency and repetition. So I know it's boring for creatives and for marketers, but you need to be the same every time at every touch point. So Alex Hormozi talks about how if you are below a certain revenue level, and this might not apply to everyone, but if you're below a certain revenue level of, I think he gives a $1 million limit or an amount. You should have one avatar or one person you're trying to get to. So one avatar, you should try and talk to them on one channel with one product or service offering. It keeps it simple, and you can get to obviously to a certain scale of your business with just that one and one. This also that also basically helps with your marketing budget as well. If you are only talking to one person on one channel, you don't need to scattergun approach your marketing. And you can especially do that today in the social media environment. If I've got one person I'm trying to get to with one product or service on one channel, I should be trying to optimize for that as much as I can, where you know exactly what your ideal customer wants to know, wants to hear, and what will make them buy. So why would I try and mix that up? Why would I try and diversify my approach to that once I know it works? I mean, for example, use of color in style guides and this style guide that I've given as the example, I can basically I could put any brand with this color scheme, and it could be anything. You need to get to a point, I believe, where you at least attempt to try and own a color. You're not going to be, for the most part, people aren't going to be Tiffany's or Barbie or Cadbury's. I think that there is value in trying to at least own a certain color so that it nails down or locks down at least one element of your brand that people can rely on, that it's expected, that it's reliable, that it's consistent. I think that you need to protect your brand from artists. Now I'll put them in inverted commas. Your brand and your brand style guide is a honed business tool, or it should be a honed business tool with a singular purpose. It needs to clearly communicate, and it needs to sell. It needs to build your brand equity. It needs to occupy a certain space within the mind of your customer. So this honed business tool, I don't think should be the platform for a designer or a marketer or an executive or a business owner's creative expression. I think once it's finalized, it needs to be implemented and executed as efficiently and effectively as possible. I don't think it should stray from its core elements. I think all that does is create brand ambiguity. You end up creating brand adjacent materials. And I think that you ultimately end up diluting your brand. And it's not going to be effective. People aren't going to recognize it or notice it, or, it's just going to become less and less effective over time. The style guide needs to be unambiguous. It needs to not inspire creativity almost. It shouldn't be a platform for personal expression. It needs to be as systematized as any other process in your business or organization. So I suppose to sum up, my belief is that your style guide, your brand should have no secondary anything, no secondary templates, palettes, photography styles, type systems, even flexible type systems. I think don't do anyone any service. I think you need to lock down any optionality at all within your guide. Because I think ultimately, if you don't, you will end up just creating these, like I said, brand adjacent materials that will over time just end up resulting in this brand drift of your creative. And the further it drifts or wobbles and wanes, whatever you want to call it, you'll get to a point where you just need to clean up the mess. That will be a costly exercise. It will be an arduous exercise. It will take a long time to do. It will take a lot of effort. And ultimately, it probably wasn't required in the first place. I think if everything is locked down and nailed down and is sharpened and honed, then I think that your brand can go further, quicker, more effective, and will ultimately be the business tool that it should be. Flexibility is flawed.